Hello, Queens. Welcome back to the Limitless Living podcast. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Today, we have the lovely Kailey Moonen on the show with us. She is an alignment coach who helps people become an energetic match for their manifestations. And I have excitement like brewing up in my chest as I even say those words because I'm so excited to see what we get into today. She is such a vibrant, bright light. And she also has this like really soothing, calming energy. So you guys will definitely want to check her out on social. And I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Kailey, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I know we've been going back and forth and trying to plan out this podcast and conversation for a while now. And I appreciate the kind introduction. I also see and honor that energy in you. So I'm excited to just dive into this and see where the conversation takes us today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So fun. So there's a lot of different ways to kick it off. But I think it would be perfect to just get right to the good stuff and start talking about self-discovery and what that really means to you, to me, just kind of like share our experience with that. Because I know that you have a like primary focus on the self-discovery piece, like within the alignment coaching and the manifestation work that you do. And so how would you even define self-discovery? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, and gosh, I feel like I don't even have a concrete answer to that question because self-discovery is so multifaceted, but it's something where, especially as entrepreneurs, I know you and I chatted a bit about this as well. It's an essential piece of the puzzle. And I think truly for anyone, the more that you learn about yourself and the more that you build your relationship with yourself, just like you would build a friendship or build a relationship with a partner or relationship with your family, the more you learn to get in touch with your intuition and your own deepest needs and desires and like what you actually want out of this life. I think that as we grow up and kind of the system that we run through, even with schooling, for example, we have K through 12, we go to college, some people go to grad school. Like we have these expectations placed on us for what life is supposed to look like. And a lot of us fall into that because it's all we've ever been taught, whether it came from a teacher at school or your parents or your grandparents or expectations of your peers. We graduate college, we get the job, we get married, we have a baby, and it's like this is just what the human experience is supposed to look like. But when you go through this process of self-discovery, which to me, it's not about becoming a different version of yourself. Like you already are that version of her. It's about unbecoming everything that you're not. So it's releasing those expectations. It's releasing any idea that you've tried to conform to or identity that you've tried to uphold in order to be well received, in order to get really super honest with who you are, what you desire, and what you want your life to look like. I'm a big believer that you can be, do, and have anything you want in life, but you have to know exactly who you are before you can bring those things to reality.
Absolutely. Speaking my language. I couldn't agree more with everything. And I love how you highlighted that it's not the becoming, but the unbecoming.
Hmm.
My lingo for that is always, it's not about adding more or changing. It's just shedding everything that you're not. Because
Yeah.
we have so many layers of those shoulds and expectations that come from, everything and anything. When we're brought into this world, we're a book of blank pages to some degree, right? Like we're put here to be the person or to be the soul that we are. And because of the way our mind works, we are a book of blank pages. And
Mhm.
everything that influences us, everything that we witness, everything that we hear from teachers to parents to like marketing and advertising and the women who are on the covers of magazines and everything that you see, it all like fills in the pages for us. And then we get into our 20s and it's like, wait a second, everything, like if you're not fulfilled, if you're not happy, that's your sign that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be rewritten or like pages that should just need to be like ripped out and thrown away. And so that is such a forever process, right? Like that's an evolution and a journey that kind of continues forever.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I like to share with my clients that, you're never going to just magically get to a day where you're like, this is it. I've done the self-discovery. This is who I am. Because life is one long journey of auditing and adjusting and appreciating this version of yourself, but like knowing you're meant to evolve into something greater. And it's still having so much love for every version of yourself, every identity that you've lived through, because those led you to where you are now. But it's also about not being afraid of knowing when you've outgrown a phase of life, when you've outgrown an identity that maybe you've carried for a really long time and led to great success and fulfillment and happiness. And that's something I personally really navigated last year, and it's so hard. But on the other side of that process, there's so much liberation because you're allowing yourself to grow and to flourish and to become even more, to become an even bigger and fuller expression of yourself by doing so.
Yeah. And it's so worth the work because it can be heavy. Sometimes it's not always super heavy. I think like the more conscious you become, right? The more you can recognize stuff that pops up that is not actually you and who you're put here to be. And sometimes it is like an easy pluck of like, nah, I'm gonna think something different instead. I'm gonna make a different choice that makes me happier. But other times it can be very heavy depending on what the topic is. And I know that you and I both know with the women that we work with, it's easier said than done to let go of the shoulds because there's so much fear instilled in what's going to happen if we let them go. And so you and I are on the same wavelength of like, you are meant to be and have everything that you dream of and desire. That's why you desire it. It's literally within you. It's already in existence in some life somewhere. And it's going to happen, but to let go of what you think you need to do or should do to get there is like the biggest choice. So I would love to just hear your input on that and like any encouragement or advice that you have to help people trust that process.
Yeah, I am going to share something that one of my mentors shared with me recently, and this analogy resonated so deeply. So I hope that it will land with some of you as well. And he was chatting through how if you just get in the car and start driving, you're probably going to have a lot of fear and anxiety because like you don't have a destination. You don't know where you're going. You're just driving and hoping for the best. Versus if I say I'm driving from Phoenix to San Diego, I have certainty in my destination. And what gives me the certainty to make that drive is the roadmap. So our brain likes certainty, our brain likes safety. We like to have that roadmap. So let's say maybe you have a goal of leaving your corporate job and starting a business. You have a map to get there, but there's going to be detours. You might pop a tire. You might have to pull over off the side of the road to pee because you missed the last exit and there's no more bathrooms for so many miles. Like there's going to be detours along this journey. And it's about trusting in that end destination, knowing that even if you have a reroute or it takes you longer to get there because you blew the tire and had to wait for AAA to come, it's about having so much certainty in that destination that no matter what detour, what reroute comes up for you, you stay fully convicted that you're going to get there. And that has really helped me. And another way of saying this, it's like having no plan B. You have to be so certain and so convicted in your plan A, and you have to detach from what that path looks like. So for me, in my little brain, it's like, okay, like this is how I want to grow my coaching business. I can perfectly plan it out to a T, the exact steps that I'm going to take. But that's me trying to control the situation. That's me trying to play God instead of playing my part for God. And so it's like you have to release what it's going to look like. And the second that you surrender and you trust yourself enough to not try and control every little part of the process, that's when the journey becomes so much fun because you get delivered exactly what you need in the most unexpected ways as long as you keep trusting that you will get to that end destination.
I have like flutters all in my body because, yeah, you just said it all so perfectly. What came up for me is the trust. And I actually wrote down an affirmation this morning that said abundance is simply trusting, being, and enjoying.
Mm,
That's it. Like the surrender and the trust is everything. And it's just a practice of trust. And you said when you do that, it gets to become fun. Yes, I mean, obviously, I love that idea because as you're talking about the road trip to San Diego, I'm thinking, are you driving, anticipating a detour, or stressing about the detour, or upset that you just spent 2 hours waiting for AAA? Or are you blaring your favorite music, drinking Starbucks with the windows down, having a blast? And so I think it's depending on the person and what works for you. And I encourage you guys who are listening to try it both ways and see what really clicks for you. Is it the practice of the surrendering and the trust that opens up the space to have fun? Or is it the practice of the fun that opens up the space to trust and surrender? Because I think everyone will kind of find one of those two patterns a little bit more natural, you know?
yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's something where the energy and art of receiving is what came up for me as you were talking through that. And it's about placing yourself in situations or in relationships or in environments where you are opening yourself to receive without expectation. So, like piggybacking off of what we just talked about, and to kind of continue with the metaphor that you just shared, are you going to choose to stress out over something that you can't control and completely shut yourself off from any other experience than the story that you're creating in your head? Or are you going to open yourself to receive, like, hey, I can't really do anything else about this right now. So I'm going to play my music. I'm going to drink my Starbucks. I'm going to appreciate the fresh air and receive what's meant for me. Maybe a car drives past you, pulls over to see, like, hey, are you guys okay? Is there anywhere I can help? And you end up talking for a while. You introduce who you are and you make a new networking connection. Like, you just never know what can come out of any situation. But if you're so hyper focused on what you can't control and being upset about that, and you're focusing on the negative experiences in your life, you're going to block yourself from receiving any potential positive outcome that could come from the experience.
Yes, absolutely. And then it becomes like this vicious cycle where you're just living in your own expectations and your own timeline. And our timelines don't really exist anyway, right? We like to think that they do, and we like fabricate them as much as possible and try to bring them into the world. But at the end of the day, like it's divine timing, no matter what. And it's always perfect, no matter what. And I love how you're talking about the art of receiving because that has been so relevant in this like first quarter of 2024 for me. And it's been such a beautiful just awareness that is what it boils down to. And if we are holding on, like if you the when we picture receiving, if that requires you to have your hands out and open, you can't do that if you're like grasping on for control, right? Like you have to let go to open your hands and actually receive. And that's also an evolution and a practice and like a muscle to be strengthened, if you will, because you're going to have your moments, your days, your weeks where you grasp back onto control and you start to panic. I like had a tax season. I had a meeting with an accountant yesterday, and money, anything, it doesn't even matter what's going on with money. Anything number related is a button for me. And so, of course, having this meeting with a new accountant where I had to explain so many different things and how I was filing and like where I'm at financially and all this stuff was just like button after button after button being pressed. And then I woke up this morning feeling like that grip my hands were trying to grip back onto control. And I had a conversation with my husband over lunch. And what it boils down to is I am different now. Everything is different now. So it gets to be different. I don't have to do that anymore. I can continue to let go because I have experienced the goodness and the blessings that come through opening my hands and just laying them out.
I love that so much. And that is a visual that I share with the women I support all of the time. I like to tie it back to meditation. So it's when we're in a meditation, how do you place your hands? Open and on top of your knees so that you can receive the insight that's meant to come to you in that meditation, in that moment. If you want to ground, your hands are down. So, like you just mentioned, we have to be open to receive. And I spent so much of my life white knuckling things because I thought, by 21, I'm supposed to have done this. By 25, I'm supposed to be married with kids. By 30, like I had all these like milestones I had placed in my head. And when we try and grip so hard to these things, we're missing out on what we're actually meant to receive. So for me in 2023, my word of the year was surrender. And the open receiving hands were always the visual that came up for me. So when I do a word of the year, I use that as like my core value to guide any decision that I'm making. It's my North Star. So time and time again, when I was presented with these opportunities to cling to an old version of myself, to cling to old stories, old beliefs, like you said, money is that button for a lot of people. So in challenging financial situations, or when I completely pivoted my coaching business and suddenly went from a comfortable amount of income per month to an amount that wasn't so comfy, that button was pushed over and over. And I kept coming back to surrender, like open to receive, open to receive. And the blessings that lie on the other side of that are just truly unmatched. So I know that if you're listening to us having this conversation and you're like, where do I frickin' start? Like, I want to hold on so tightly. I want my life to look a certain way. I challenge you to think of one small way that you can surrender each day. Whether it's, okay, like I was going to go work out this morning at 7 a.m., I woke up at 7:05. Instead of thinking that your workout had to be at that time, how can you surrender and still get in some movement that day, even if it didn't go perfectly according to plan? Or maybe you had happy hour scheduled with some friends at the end of the week and they canceled on you and you're feeling sad because now you feel like your friends didn't want you to be there, whatever it may be, whatever crazy story you're telling yourself. How can you then use that time that's open in your calendar to show yourself a little bit of extra love? So it's less about thinking everything in your life has to go a certain way and more about being open to honoring what you need in any given situation.
I love that. Love that so much because it gets to, we just get to take the pressure off should we choose to. And it doesn't even like we all have so much going on, right? Like we all have stuff, we're all busy, we all have plans, we all have goals and dreams, and like we're all trying to make it happen. And we don't need to feel pressed and stressed through the whole process. And
Mhm.
so in those little acts of surrender, that's like it, let it feel light, and if it feels light and like, oh, is this too good to be true? Like, I don't have to shame myself for waking up late. I don't have to do all of that. No, you don't. Like, it gets to feel a little bit lighter and you get to give yourself that because we don't need the control or the pressure and the stress to do good work and to get to where we're going. In fact, we'll actually probably get there a lot faster if we
Mhm.
let it go, right?
Yes, 100%. And a mantra that came up for me in my recent trip to Austin, the live event that I was telling you about for the mentorship group I'm in. That weekend, I kept finding myself saying, like turning to whoever I was speaking to and saying, it gets to be this good. And I know for me, as I really started this journey with self discovery and receiving and surrender, everything that we've talked about so far, I would find that when I would start to experience more good in my life, I had never really had good at that capacity before. I was like reaching my glass ceiling. I was like, oh, this is as good as it gets. So when I would experience something that was better, I would fall into this mindset of expecting something bad to be coming or waiting for the other shoe to drop because I was like, this is too much good. I don't know how to handle it. And so leaning into that mindset of it gets to be this good is your permission slip to increase your capacity to receive more good in your life. And it just continues to expand and expand and expand from there. So, in those moments when you find yourself constricting or retracting or thinking, oh my gosh, what something bad, catastrophic's got to be coming to like balance this out. No, it's not. Like, you're worthy of receiving this level of good. You just have to trust yourself, coming back to what we were talking about with the roadmap, enough to know that, like, that's your inherent worth. It gets to be this good.
Hmm. Yes, that absolutely is your inherent worth. So many different concepts and teachings are coming up to mind as we're talking about that glass ceiling from the upper limit syndrome. Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Upper Limiting, which is by Gay Hendricks. And then Brene Brown talks about foreboding joy, which is really just the visceral vulnerability that we feel in moments of intense joy, which is that same concept of I've never experienced this level of good before. Something bad is coming. She talks about how we dress rehearse tragedy by like playing it out in our minds, which is so real,
Oh,
so
yeah.
real. Oh my gosh. And it reminds me, it just, I had a conversation with my client a couple months ago, and she was in tears on this session saying, I don't know how to live this life. Like, I never thought I would be here. And amazing things were happening, challenging things still, of course, always. But her life was just so much abundantly more than what she ever thought it was going to become. And she felt like she physically couldn't do it, but she could. Fast forward just a couple months later, and she's just in this beautiful place of like full authentic expression and this openness that is so like her practice of surrender has become so strong. And now she sits in front of me and says, like, I am open. Whatever God has for me, I'm here for it. And I don't need it to go according to my plan. And she has so much joy in that process. And it was just a couple months ago that she felt like she didn't have the capacity for the good. So if you are feeling that way, keep going and please adopt the belief that there is no such thing as too good to be true. When people say it's too good to be true, I'm like, ah, like, please don't
No,
say
like,
that. No,
shake
that's
them.
yes, that's not it. That's not it. It gets to be so much abundantly more good than what we could even imagine because why not?
Mhm.
Literally.
I relate to that story so hard because it's my own experience, and I feel like I am the walking embodiment of that. Literally, at one point, had that call with my mentor and was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know like how to hold this type of life. And I think that is why self-discovery is such an underrated piece of this puzzle. You can go on Instagram, TikTok, social media, scroll through, you can see a million and one people these days who have scaled their business to X, Y, and Z months. They have, built this empire of their dreams. And a lot of times there's holes in the system, or the empire comes crashing down, or they see success for a couple of years and then they burn out to the point that they can't continue with it. And it's because as their business has expanded, they have not increased their energetic capacity to hold space for that business, whether that is their space to hold that amount of money and know what to do with it, or to hold energetic space for that number of clients or for that number of team members or whatever it may be. And so that's why this inner work is so fucking important. Like, you have to grow along with your business. The woman who's operating a successful 5K a month business does not have the same energetic principles in place as a woman who is operating a $1 million a month business. Like, you have to expand your capacity to receive, expand your capacity to hold that level of good as those things expand alongside you. And I think that is such a topic of conversation that doesn't get talked about enough in the business space. And I'm curious kind of your perspective on that, or what you've witnessed with some of the clients that you've supported.
Yeah. I mean, ooh, that's like a loaded question. My mind's going in so many different places. The thing that's really ringing is you are perfectly on path. And that everything that you just said is exactly why we cannot rush our process.
Yes.
And we really do need to, again, trust and let go and believe that we are perfectly on path and that we are learning what we need to learn as we need to. And we are expanding our space and our capacity for joy and success and love and money and connection and all the things at the perfect time. Because even though, like, maybe I want to have a 7-figure business right now, I'm not there, like I'm not there yet. I don't have that like space, and there's a lot of things that need to be in place, and that's okay.
Mhm.
That's totally okay. And that's why you can't like put that expectation or pressure on yourself to be there, because you'll be there once you're able to expand that space. And you don't want to rush it, because just like you said, that happens a lot where like everything comes crumbling down, or like there's burnout and depression, and all of these things can happen when we're like trying to get off of our own divine path. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. And I think it's something where when we become so focused on the outward metrics, thinking, okay, I need to get to point X, Y, and Z by this time. And like you said, rushing the timeline, we neglect the inner metrics that actually support that external transformation to be able to happen.
Perfectly said. Yes, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yes.
Which reminds me of something that I did want to chat with you about, which is when we talk about manifestation, it's really easy. And I, in the past, have taken the mindset of like, I need to manifest the tangible things. I need to get right to the outcome so that that space for my life enjoyment, fulfillment, for me to live out my dreams, opens up once I have all this stuff that I thought was like creating the container for it
Mhm.
and what it really is. And I feel like everyone who's actually like manifesting their dream life understands that it's the roles reverse, and it is the embodiment energetically, and it is the like living out your dreams without the stuff, and then letting that become a byproduct. And so I would just love, since this is your area of expertise, for you to like speak on that and probably articulate it better than I can, because I've heard that message in so many ways, but it's really, really hard to fully grasp until you walk it out yourself.
Yeah, I think this is so important. And the number of extremely quote unquote successful entrepreneurs who I've had the honor of sharing space with all have a similar part of their story where they achieved the external success. They had the car, they had the relationship, they were rolling in money, they had the roster of soulmate clients, they were scaling their business to multi 7 figures a month, and they found themselves in a place where they still were not happy. They, by like an external perspective or like measure of society's idea of success, they had all of the things. But once they got the things, they found themselves itching for a newer thing, a better thing, a higher income threshold, more clients, more assistant coaches, like bigger, bigger, bigger. And each time they got to that next level, they still weren't satisfied. And it's because, like you said, it's backward. You need to become the energetic match for the life that you desire. So if you are building your business or creating these things, manifesting, like you said, whatever external tangible thing from a place of scarcity, of fear, of lack, of comparison, whatever ingredient you are putting into the recipe is going to come out in the final product. So let's say we're making bread and your main ingredient is scarcity as the flour. That scarcity is going to be in every slice of the bread that you consume. versus if you are approaching life from those higher level energies of joy, of love, of passion, of fun, of play, and that's your flower. I don't know about you, but I would much rather eat the loaf of bread that has that in every slice than the fear, the scarcity, and the lack. So, to tie it back to what we were just talking about, when you buy the sports car, you reach the $1 million month, you have this many clients on your roster, and it was all from a place of how can I make more money? Like, what if my life's going to fall apart if I don't make more money? And it's in that fear, that scarcity, that lack. You're never going to be happy with any external validation that you receive, with any external tangible outcome that you create. Versus if you build those things from a place of authentic expression and love and joy, and like, this is the impact that I want to leave on this world. And because you're showing up in that energy, you're attracting the love of your life. You're attracting the community of supportive, like-minded women who make you feel seen, heard, and valued. You're attracting the beautiful beach home on the cliffside that you've always dreamed of. Like, whatever the frick it may be that you're trying to manifest, it's as a result of the energy that you're emitting into the world versus thinking that you have to have these things in order to be received in the energy that you desire.
Snaps. Or that. Oh, that was so juicy. The bread analogy, love it. That is, I'm going to have to use that one because it makes it so clear and undeniable. We know that's how it works. When you put it like that, it's like, oh yeah, wow, okay. So, and this, brings us to, if you feel like you're in that cycle of scarcity and lack, and you're like, I don't know how to, I was in that place last year and
Mhm.
I had a really hard time. It took me a long time to pull myself out of it. And that's where I found, my truest, most purposeful mission on this world, with teaching people how to use fun as a success strategy instead of the hustle, because it was through the integration of connection, play, and creativity that I pulled myself out of that cycle. And it really, really brought me home to myself. I connected with my intuition, inner knowing, and everything just kind of like really rippled and like picked up momentum so fast from there, which is why I'm so passionate about the fun, because it can be hard to, again, get yourself out of that vicious cycle, because when your brain is used to repeating a certain pattern or narrative, whether it began last year or like in your childhood, whatever was told or modeled to you, when your brain is in that pattern, it's not that easy to break.
Yeah.
And you gotta like whip out the tools and do the thing. And so for me, like, and I think everyone has a different methodology and way of helping their clients do this when we do this kind of work. So for me, of course, that is the connection, the creativity, and the play, along with the subconscious coaching and mindset work. For you, how do you help your clients move out of that place?
Yeah, I love this question so much. I think there's multiple ways to do it, and sometimes I'll use different approaches. But the main thing that it boils down to for me is number one, understanding that when that fear, that scarcity, that lack, maybe like you said, that's all you've been used to. So, an old version of yourself, when those feelings come in, maybe you've gone a while without having them, and suddenly like you wake up and you're just riddled with it. And I'll be honest, like this still happens to me sometimes up into this day. It's not that it's ever going to completely fully go away, it's that you become better equipped to process and handle it. So the first thing is understanding that this is not you backsliding into your old self. This is not you automatically like going back to old you and you're stuck there. As you step into a new version of yourself, or this more aligned version of yourself, I think that's a better way to explain it. You're going to have echoes of your old self come up, because that's your ego's job, is to keep you safe and to keep you in your comfort zone. So as you're really rewiring your brain and starting new habits and creating change, that old self's going to be like, come here, like, come over here, come back where it's comfy. And the first step is recognizing when that happens, being able to detach from those feelings, those emotions, because That fear, scarcity, and lack, for me, it shows up as like tightness in my chest, anxiety and racing thoughts, and just like that overwhelming feeling of doom. So if I wake up one morning and I'm feeling that tightness or my brain's racing, I now know how to identify that in my body and to say, hey, okay, I'm experiencing these things. I'm going to see them for what they are, detach from it, and know that I don't have to carry this any longer than the next 90 seconds. That's how long it takes to fully process an emotion. So for me, it's having a couple of tangible release tools or practices. I am a huge advocate of screaming into a pillow. So when I'm like feeling any type of negative energy, taking a couple of deep breaths, like breathing in, holding that pillow, like letting it rip. The first time I ever did this, I was like, I don't have anything to scream about. And my friend was like, no, like let it out. And I was so surprised at the sound that came out. But it's somatically releasing the experience. And then I like to let myself kind of like have a little bit of a meditative couple of minutes, go for a walk, something to like allow my energy to recenter in my body. And a favorite practice of mine is to then journal about exactly how I desire to feel, the energy I know I'm worthy of receiving. So I'm literally shifting my energetic state physically through that release practice, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually by pulling myself back to center, by pulling myself back to clarity of the version of myself that I choose to embody on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I love that process and like making mental notes. I don't think I've ever actually done the scream in a pillow thing. And it's so silly, like the blocks that come up that we catch ourselves like creating for no
Yeah.
reason. Because when I think about screaming into a pillow, you know what I think? I think it's gonna be too loud. Like it's gonna essentially have the effect as if I actually just screamed into open air, which is so silly because I live
Yeah.
in a house. I don't even live in an apartment. Like why would it even matter? Like your brain is just, trying to keep you in that place by all means necessary. But I'm going to take this as a little inspo to do the scream in a pillow technique and just see how it feels. Just try it on, see if it's for me.
12 out of 10 recommend. Like every time I do it, I feel light as a feather afterwards. I'm just energetically floating all day.
I love that. So, a random-ish question for you around
Mhm.
that. I'll try not to give like too much background, but basically, like through a certification and training that I did, what came up was kind of learning your stress response. And most people respond either in anger and conflict and blame, or like apathy and sadness and like more like depressive like tendencies. And everyone's like a little bit of everything, right? We all experience and feel everything, but people typically have like a like knee-jerk response that they go to first. For me, it is that apathy and withdrawal and sadness and like victimhood mentality. And I'm curious to hear what resonates with you, because if screaming in a pillow is like the thing for you, that makes me think of like the anger and conflict type of
Yeah,
response.
I actually really resonate more with the sadness and apathy, shame, victim mentality. I can spiral into there so quickly, but same thing that we just talked about. I know how to identify exactly what that feels like, what that looks like, where I experience it in my body to then be able to look at that and separate myself from the experience. And that has allowed me to stop those spirals before they start, or to, sit with the sadness. Crying is another great release practice. Like just let myself cry and like get it all out and then clear my energy to move forward. The screaming in the pillow is a relatively new practice for me. And like I shared, that was the block that came up for me the first time I had a friend guide me through this. And I was like, I'm not angry. I don't have anything to yell about. And she was like, you don't have to be angry. And once I finally gave myself permission to just do it, for me, what came up was more so that there was a little girl inside of me who had her voice quieted for so long or who thought she couldn't speak up. And that was like my throat chakra was just busted open. Like she was like, wow, we get to make so much noise now. And after that, like I found so much more clarity in my voice, sharing it through podcasts, sharing it through my content, sharing it through my writing. So for me, it wasn't necessarily like from a block of anger. It was more just like clearing that throat chakra to have more authentic self-expression. So I think it looks different for everyone. And there's so many different ways we can release. The thing is that we're taught that these aren't safe things for us to do. Like you're a little girl and it's like, oh, don't cry about this, or like you don't get to be mad and scream and throw a temper tantrum. Like you have to have this like good little girl image. And I think so many of us carry that with us as women who are growing and expanding. So it's giving yourself permission to know that like self-discovery and healing is not I need to be this perfect presentation of myself who's always happy, who's always love and light and rainbows and butterflies. Like, I love embodying that energy, but I also love my darkness because when I honor my darkness, that's when I get to be fully received in my light. So that's true healing, is honoring the full spectrum of your emotions here.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
That was so good. That resonated so deeply. And yeah, it's just like when we try and avoid, suppress, move, like, yeah, just avoid or suppress our negative emotions, our dark emotions, like we really dilute our human experience because we're meant to experience the full spectrum and they all serve a purpose. And yes, some are more pleasant than others, and some are definitely not pleasant at all. And in those moments, just like we're talking about with these practices, find what works for you. But I definitely would encourage you to feel as hard and fast as you can. That's what I tell myself. Like when something's bubbling up, I'm like, okay, I can table this for later and let it like kind of like linger and poison everything that I'm doing for the next 48 hours. Or I can just go cry, or I can go scream into the pillow, or I can go do whatever it is and just move through the emotion, let it move through me so I can move through it and then get back to the place that's a little bit more pleasant. But there's nothing wrong ever with any of those negative emotions, or there's nothing wrong when things are hard. That's just life. I listened to that. I heard that on a podcast recently, and I don't know why it really just like zinged me, but it did. He was saying that if life is hard for you, there's nothing, it's not because of you or anything that you've done. It's because that's just life. And that's just life in different forms for every single person. So, like, there's no need to shame yourself, and there's no need to think that everything's wrong with you or that you've done everything wrong if you're feeling these things. Just feel them, no judgment, and flow right through it.
Mm. Yes, and I think this kind of like brings our entire conversation full circle. And I know this is something I really used to believe. A lot of the women I support have this belief, is that when we get to a certain point in life, or we get to a certain point of success, where like we were talking about, maybe we have the external tangible things, we think that we're just going to be happy all the time. That when we get to that level 10 life, it's going to be all rainbows and butterflies and sparkles and great things. And one of the greatest pieces of advice I was ever given was that new levels don't eliminate your problems. New levels come with different challenges and different problems. So if you are, maybe you're not where you want to be yet, maybe you have big goals set for yourself, and right now you're experiencing a lot of those, darker energies, maybe some depression, anxiety, fear, scarcity, lack, all the things we just talked about. If you are not able to hold space and heal through those things now, you're going to have a big old heavy backpack of them that you're going to carry with you to each level. And that backpack is going to get heavier and heavier and heavier as you ascend that scale. So like you said right now, why would you not just give yourself the space to process it so that you don't have to carry it any longer? Something I learned from one of my somatic breathwork practitioners is that it takes 90 seconds to fully process an emotion. So you have, like you said, the option to, okay, like I'm feeling this little bit of sadness, maybe I need to go cry. Give yourself 90 seconds to go cry, recollect yourself, have that grounding moment, maybe do a little journaling, or you can carry it with you for the next 48 hours, the next week, the next, month, year. You can carry it for 90 years unless you take care of it right now. So it's just giving yourself permission to have these experiences and know that, like, regardless of the highlight reel that we see on social media where it looks like everyone has their shit together all the time, like, plot twist, I don't know anyone who has their shit together all the time, because that's how robots operate. That's not how humans operate. So stop trying to be a robot and allow yourself to just be a human. It's so much more fun over here.
Yes, give yourself the gift of a full human experience. And the only way to do that is to feel it all and go everywhere and just kind of like, yeah, just be part of it all. Like as life's doing its thing. I mean, it gets to be beautiful that way. It doesn't have to be perfect to be full and beautiful. And I would choose the fullness every time, personally. So
100%.
that is a perfect place to put a bow on this conversation. Kailey, thank you so much for being on today. You are so wise, and just the way that you speak about these topics and articulate in your analogies and everything is just so potent and clear and soulful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you for sharing this space with me. I know you and I could talk all day long, so maybe we'll have to do a part two someday. But I hope for anyone listening that this episode allowed you to feel seen and heard and understood and valued, because that's always my goal at the end of the day. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about anything that we chatted through. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you all again in the future.
Yes, yes, we love to connect. So I will drop Kailey's Instagram in the notes below. And if you guys resonated with this, if it related, seriously, shoot us a DM. Let's chat about it. We would love to voice memo back and forth and just connect a bit. And if it brought you some value, share it with someone else who you love, who you think it would bring value to. That's all we ask. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Kailey, thank you for being here. And I will see you all next time on the Limitless Living podcast.